Thanks for tuning in to I Serve Orientation Online. I'm Larry Page, Assistant Lead Pastor for the Zion Landover campus. I'm so excited to be your personal service trainer for today. I just made that up, but nonetheless, listen, I just want to do a couple of things for you. The first thing I want to do is give you the game plan, and then I want to define an important term. So let's just start with defining the word volunteer. I had someone say to me the other day that people who serve on Sundays are volunteering their time. And I thought about it. This is true, but it's also false. You see, poor definitions can lead to miscommunication. The word or the origin of the word volunteer comes from a 15th century French term, volontaire, which means one who offers himself or herself for military service. Now imagine how things would change if modern times retained the original definition of what it meant to volunteer. That volunteer meant joining an army. It meant that you were willing to sacrifice your life to save someone else's. That's a game changer. But unfortunately, words are redefined over time. And today when people say I'm volunteering, it means I'm gonna help you out. Or I'm doing you a favor and you better not get upset if I don't come through because you could have nobody. Well, I want you to get real close to the camera when I say this. Listen, I want you to understand that you're not just help. You are an extension of God's hand. And here's a principle beyond the church doors. Sometimes nobody is certainly better than the wrong somebody. This is not just about Zion. We're not just looking for anybody, but we're looking for God's body. We're looking for service team members. Look at how Jesus defines the attitude of someone who works for him in Luke chapter 17, verses 7 through 10. Jesus tells his disciples, when a servant comes in from plowing or taking care of the sheep, does his master say, come in, eat with me? No, he says, prepare my meal, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat. Then you can come eat later. And does the master thank the servant for doing what he was told to do? Of course not. In the same way, when you obey me, you should say, listen to this, we are unworthy servants who have simply done our duty. Jesus shocks us and says, you serve me, you aren't worthy, service is your privilege, and it's your duty. Now, I just lost about 50% of you right here, but I want you to come back. Don't skip this part of the training. Let's go back to the military analogy. You can only serve with this kind of attitude if you understand that Jesus first and foremost led by example and that Jesus suffered for you. So he doesn't flinch at this expectation because it cost him his life to save yours. Let that marinate. Service is really serious business. I remember taking my wife on a date to Black Eyed Peas restaurant. The place was completely empty. There was no greeters, no waiters, no one at the cash registers. It should have been a warning. But we decided to seat ourselves. And after we waited for a while, we noticed no one came. Finally, a guy comes out wearing sweatpants, an apron, and a hairnet and says, may I take your order? Let me show you how we responded. Okay, let me come back slowly. Listen, sometimes people are going to vote with their feet. And it wasn't that the food was bad. The guy didn't per se do anything wrong. We left because an unspoken trust was violated. We all subconsciously know that quality service requires several people to do their job. How can the cook focus on good food if he's also cleaning tables? We made a judgment. We make judgments based on the quality of service and the quantity of service. And if the lines are too long, we don't applaud a business for being very popular. Oftentimes, if it's too long, there's not enough people at the cash register, we just leave. Think about how many people have left the church because of UWA. And don't sit there and act like you don't know what UWA is. It stands for Ushers with an Attitude.
The old ladies, when they usher, ain't they mean? The one, especially one be working the back door, ain't she mean? You ever see them, they be on the inside of church praying, and you trying to go in the church, she holding the damn door for dear life. You open the door, you be talking through that crack. I'll go to another church. You go to church, you looking through the double glass door, trying to see who in there, trying to see where you gonna sit. Don't they get an attitude just because you looking through the glass? They turn around in the glass and like, what are you, a security guard? I tell you what, you go to a church and sit in the wrong seat. And then number 2 usher boy working. She gonna let you know that you cannot sit there. Now she'll find a way to let you know. She'll blend in with the choir if she have to. You sit in the church minding your own business. All of a sudden here she comes.
Now, Rickey Smiley makes a serious problem a comedic moment. But if we don't address ushers with bad attitudes, then the joke is on us. And sometimes people leave the church because of how they're treated. So this orientation is really about helping you capture the spirit of service at Zion. If you understand the mission, the model, and the method, you have the spirit, and that's the point. Capturing the spirit of a service team member. So let's start with the mission. Mission drives a Zion service team member. Every service team member has to have a sense of mission. There is nothing more frustrating than to be in the car with someone who has no clue where they're going. Service can be just like this. If you don't have a clear mission, then you will eventually run out of gas and you'll find yourself complaining about expectations because you can't see the big picture.
It wasn't until after I lost my eyesight that I wasn't afraid to fail anymore. The first step into my art career was going blind, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my life.
When you look at it, this blind man teaches us an invaluable lesson about vision. You don't have to see the picture in order to envision it. Vision starts on the inside. Mission is driven by vision and protected by values. Mission is the big picture, and the big picture that drives Zion Church is simply this: to help people meet God, grow closer to Him, and serve Him. Now, your service sets the stage to make this dream a reality. The service team helps fulfill the overarching mission through helping more people meet God. Watch this, by showing more people how to serve God. Let's look at this a little more closely. Your goal isn't just service, but serving so well that someone who doesn't know God can see God through your service. That's, for me, that's just mind-boggling. It's an incredible opportunity. Here's the difference. Regular service hinges on you just doing your job. But the norm for mission-driven service is going out of your way. This kind of service is never convenient. Jesus literally left heaven, showed us how to serve, and then said, I want you to go to the end of the world so people can meet me. In Matthew 28:19, Jesus says, therefore go. Don't wait for things to be perfect. Notice, that's me talking parenthetically. Don't wait for somebody to ask you. Don't wait for your nails to be pretty. Don't wait for you to become a perfect person. I want you to go, and I want you to make learners of all nations. And notice Jesus doesn't say go and tell them to obey me. He says go and teach them to obey. Demonstrate it. Show it. It's through our obedience that people can see our God. And then he says, and keep on doing this until I return. Why? Because he wants to grow. If you go and you show, then we will grow. That, for me, that's exciting. But here's the key. You can't show somebody someone you don't know. See, this is the problem. Sometimes the way we treat each other is often a reflection of how well we know God. And when you think about it, sometimes it's frightening. I can hear you now saying, I love God. You don't love God? What's wrong with you? Let me tell you, there's a great song by Erica Campbell, but I'm going to tell you, here's what's wrong. Because God says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 20, if someone says, I love God, but hates a Christian brother or sister, that person is a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? This is why the primary core value for a serving team member at Zion is simply this: people matter to God and should be treated like God. Now, before y'all panic, I just want to, in other words, what I'm saying is love them with God's kind of love. Serve them the way that God served us. He gave his best. Our service should scream, do you know how valuable you are? Your life was worth God's one and only son. It's funny how we do, because we don't always treat people with that kind of value. I remember working at the Washington Sports Clubs, this Washington's elite, all the politicians. You know it's a special gym when they have a racquetball club. So I noticed the man at the front counter. He had on a funky Hawaiian shirt, and he just looked out of place. So I thought to myself, man, they'll let anybody in here. Now don't judge me. I'm just telling you what my heart was doing. It wasn't right. So I asked one of my coworkers, who is this guy at the front counter? And he said, oh, he just happens to own all of the Washington sports clubs on the East Coast. Now, here was the man who signs my check, and I had no clue of who he was because I was distracted by his appearance. And sometimes we treat people the same way when they walk through the doors of the church. The truth is, we serve on a sliding scale, and too often how we serve is predicated on who we serve. Funny story. During one of our services on a Sunday, there's a gentleman sitting in the back row, very unassuming, nothing prominent about him, but he asked me for a cup of water. And now I'm saying to myself, I'm a campus pastor. Is there a sign on my forehead that says, run and fetch? And so, but in that moment, I got myself together and I thought, well, if Bishop T.D. Jakes were to ask the same question, would I not have ran to get the water? And I thought about this. Then this thing, see, here is the point. I wouldn't have hesitated. See, the point is, God wants us to serve people as if we were serving him. Jesus stresses this through a parable where he tells his disciples about when they clothed him and they fed him and they visited him in prison. Of course, they'd never actually done it. So they wanted to know, when did we ever do this for you, Jesus? And Jesus says in Matthew 25:40, he says, and the king will say, I tell you the truth, when you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. That's really scary. treat every person that comes through the doors of Zion as if they were Jesus. And we can't just leave this to good intentions. This is why we have values. We need values to protect this very important goal. If we can get a firm grip on 5 core team values: care for people, serve with competence, consistent character, team chemistry, and contagious community. If we can get our hands around this, then it will not only make Zion an irresistible place to be, but it will also make you an incredible part of any team that God allows you to be a part of. Just think about this. Care is the first value. We like to say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. When you see someone that's elderly waiting in line and you rush to get them seated, you're saying, I care about you. When someone gets upset in the parking lot because traffic is slow and they say something to you that's not in the Bible, but you smile and you say, thank you for your patience. I'm sorry for your inconvenience. You're saying we care. When someone is new to Zion and you walk them to the place that they need to be rather than pointing, you're saying to that person, we care. Because if you don't care, then they'll erroneously believe that God doesn't either. Now let's talk about the second protective value, which is competence. Competence is the second value. There is nothing more frustrating than talking to someone who is not teachable, a know-it-all. See, competence is not just about doing something well, but the core of it is an insatiable quest to do something better. Chuck Brown infamously said, whatever you do, big or small, do it well or don't do it at all. I could add, sure, you're right. But the point is, it's so profound that we have to do things well. Let's move to the third attribute here. This is all about character. Character is what you do when no one is looking. When you look at character, there's a term we used to use back in the day for someone who had poor character. It was called two-faced. This is ultimately the spirit of hypocrisy. You see, if we don't get this straight, then we use service as a mask to prove our worth rather than using it as a towel to show someone else their worth. We get into church and start talking real funny because thou knowest I perpetrateth a fraudeth. But if I doth addeth, th on the end of my wordeth, then people won't know that my character stinketh. Here's what Pastor Reverend Mac Battle said to me one time. He sums up character so nicely. He says, don't pretend to be what you don't intend to be. You see, you can be diligent in character and in service because the aim of your service is not the applause of men, but it's the approval of God. Let's talk about the fourth value, chemistry. How well do you get along with people? Some people can't get along with themselves. See, I know that people are valuable to God because people can be so difficult to work with. People are like perms. God uses difficult people to make you hot, then straighten you out. And you want God to take them out, get this out. And God says no, because he's using them to take you through his process. Your ability to deal with people that everyone else rejects proves God's love is real. Listen to John chapter 13, verse 35. Jesus says, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Let's talk about the fifth value here. Community is the fifth value. There are 3 words that encapsulates community: is unity, is commune, and is communicate. You see, the challenge with community is that a lot of us come out of dysfunctional families. Then we give our lives to Christ. And he says, I want you to become a family. This is why we have to commune, spend time together beyond Sunday. We have to communicate, not just to get information across, but to get to know one another. And we have to stay united through love. Look at how close God wants us to be. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 20, he says, but now there are many members, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. You see, the anatomical analogy paints a picture that God desires us to experience literally through his Spirit. So let's now move from the mission to the motivation of a Zion service team member. This is all about team spirit. If the mission is the engine, then the spirit is the fuel. A Zion service team member is motivated by a team spirit. You always want to ask yourself, why? Why do I want to serve? I love what leadership speaker Simon Sinek says. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. Now I want you to think about this. I serve because, now you fill in the blank. If God's love is not in your blank, then it's the wrong motive. Why did God sacrifice his one and only son? For God so loved the world. See, getting God's love requires you to have God's Spirit. I love the way it's stated in Galatians 4:4. It says it like this: God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. This is why a relationship with God is so crucial for individuals who serve in the church. Without God's Spirit, we won't serve with God's heart. I want to say it another way. Without his Spirit, you can't serve with his heart. If you're close enough to God, watch this, then God's Spirit will move you even when you don't feel like it. You see, becoming close is both our challenge and our greatest opportunity, which is why in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2, it says, always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults because of your love. He says, make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit. Do you see how close God wants us to be? One body, one Lord, one band, one sound. Okay, that last part I stole from Drumline. But it's an important principle in the movie Drumline. Dr. Lee has to remind one of his students, Devin, about the principle of one band, one sound.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to music. Good morning and welcome to Atlanta A&T University Marching Band Training. The next 2 weeks will be your introduction and possibly induction into a great marching band legacy. If you're here, it's because you believe in musicianship. If you're here, it's because you believe in Coltrane, Miles Davis, Stevie Wonder, and the elements known as Earth, Wind, and Fire. If you are here, it is because you have a fervent, unequivocal belief in teamwork. And if you wish to remain here, you better start believing in being on time. You. Who is your roommate?
Devin. Miles. Sir.
Eyes front.
What's up, Dr. Lee?
It's all good, Mr. Miles. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
Why was he late?
Guess he overslept.
Well, why didn't you wake him?
I'm not his mother, sir.
I asked Mr. Miles why his roommate was late. He says he guesses he overslept. I asked why didn't you wake him, and he says he is not his mother. Section leaders, what is our concept?
One band, one sound.
One band, one sound. When one of us is late, we are all late. When one of us looks or sounds bad, we all look and sound bad. So what's the concept?
One band.
One sound.
Now I want 10 laps from all those who are not their roommate's mama. Don't whine. And while you're jogging around the field, let the robust composition of the Saints come marching in, flow through your mind.
So Dr. Lee says to the section leaders, what is our concept? And they respond, one band, one sound. This brings up an important principle that Dr. Lee teaches. When one of us is late, we're all late. When one of us looks or sounds bad, we all look and sound bad. So this concept is so important. Can I dream for a minute? Our serving team community, the church, should surpass the familial bond of any Greek fraternity or sorority, because we don't just have letters and a line. We share the same spirit with the Alpha and the Omega, which, if you're not clear about whether God's Spirit lives in you, please, let's talk before you try to serve. I'm telling you, we can't walk together unless we have spiritual agreement. We'll fall short of God's expectation for service because you'll attempt to do a supernatural job while depending on the limited resources of your natural ability. Here is truly the problem with serving without God's Spirit. The word for service is synonymous with minister. The Latin word for minister is menuere. It means to reduce. When you're motivated with God's heart for service, you're willing to step down so someone else can step up. In Mark chapter 10, verse 45, Jesus gives us his motivation. He says, I did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for many. Why? Because I came to seek and save the lost. God's service will drain you, but if you're born again, his Spirit will fill you. But if there is no salvation, it's like pouring water into a container with a huge hole in it. Now, how do I know that I have his Spirit? It's a good question. Number one, love. I'm motivated to make sacrifices for no other reason other than because it pleases God. Humility. No job is too low to help someone reach God's hand. 3, heart for the lost. This is so Zion. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to reach whomever I can. And the last is worship. That's what we were created for. J.D. Greer says it this way: true worship is serving God for nothing more than more of God. So we talked about the mission. We have to go, show, so we'll grow. Then we talked about the motivation. Why do you want to serve? Do you really want to seek the lost? Now let's deal with the last mark of a Zion service team member, which is the model. If service boils down to being reduced, you can see why this can create a problem for anyone struggling with low self-esteem, pride, or looking for recognition, or even trying to atone for some kind of guilt. It can wreak havoc on God's service team. Servant leadership is the model for a Zion service team member. Servant leadership is counterintuitive because everything in culture shouts, climb the ladder. And Jesus is shouting, lay your ladder down so you can build a bridge for someone who's trying to reach me. He said stuff like, whoever is trying to keep their life will lose their life, and whoever loses their life for my sake will keep it. And then he turns around and says, the first will be last and the last will be first. Jesus looks at leadership from the bottom up and not the top down. If we don't understand this, then we'll end up with mixed match service. We'll have our own ideas about service mixed in with just enough of God's to create a whole lot of confusion. So to clear this up, in John chapter 13, verses 14 through 15, Jesus gets up from dinner, takes the towel that was around his waist, he kneels down, and then he washes dirty feet. And he says to his disciples in John 13, verse 14, if I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should follow, that you shall do as I have done to you. Jesus wanted his disciples to model his attitude towards service. He wanted his disciples to learn the same lesson. The principle that Julius taught Jerry in Remembering the Titans. Y'all remember that movie? Julius told Jerry in Remembering the Titans, attitude reflects leadership.
All right, man, listen. I'm Gary. You're Julius. Let's get some particulars and just get this over with, all right?
Particulars?
Yeah.
No matter what I tell you, you ain't gonna never know nothing about me.
Hey, listen. I ain't running any more of these 3 days, okay?
Well, what I got to say you really don't want to hear, because honesty ain't too high up on your people priority list, right?
Honesty? You want honesty? All right, honestly, I think you're nothing. Nothing but a pure waste of God-given talent. You don't listen to nobody, man. Not even Doc or Boone. Shiver push on the line every time, man. You blow right past them. Push them, pull them, do something. You can't run over everybody in this league. And every time you do, you leave one of your teammates hanging out to dry. Me in particular.
Why should I give a hoot about you? Huh? Or anybody else out there? You want to talk about a waste? You the captain, right?
Right.
Captain's supposed to be the leader, right?
Right.
You got a job?
I have a
You
job.
been doing your job?
I've been doing my job.
Then why don't you tell your white buddies to block for Rev better? Because they have not blocked for him worth a plug nickel, and you know it. Nobody plays, yourself included. I'm supposed to wear myself out for the team? What team? No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look out for myself, and I'm going to get mine.
See, man, that's the worst attitude I ever heard.
Attitude reflect leadership, Captain.
It's a profound statement. Do you have the same attitude of your leader, Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing so that he could reach you and I? Wow. Ken Jennings and John Stallworth calls Jesus' model or his example the servant leadership model. There are 5 steps in this servant leadership model. And the bottom step, ironically, is the top step. See, you have to run, number 1, this is the first step, towards a great purpose. Strive for something beyond your self-interest. The second step is up in the pyramid. Put others first. The third step is raise the bar. In order to serve the many, you first must serve the least. Then that next step is blaze the trail. This step says, in order to protect your value, you got to give it all the way. And then finally, build on strength. This step says, you cannot become the best until you make someone better. See, when our service causes unbelievers to seek God, and new believers to serve God, and mature believers to reproduce more leaders who reflect the servant-like nature of God, then our mission and our vision will collide and create a beautiful picture of kingdom growth. Well, I'm so grateful that you took this journey with me. Thank you for participating in this service orientation. If nothing has changed in your thinking as we walk through this training together, please take a little bit more time to count the cost before you join the team. As much as we'd love to have you on our team, we'd much rather ensure that you are on God's team, that you have His Spirit, rather than just having another person serving. At a minimum, we hope that you have a greater sense of our mission, of our motivation, of our model. If you ever forget what our picture is all about, just study Christ, because at the end of all of our service, that's who people should see. This team is His body filled with His Spirit. One band, one sound. Thanks again for tuning in, and if you feel led to take the next step, our ministry placement team will follow up with you this week. And Lord willing, I'll see you soon, and I look forward to some new potential service team members. God bless.
Yeah. Smiley. Taking it to the world, y'all. Ain't nothing changed. Gotta be one.
Alright, do you see what's happening? The world is so confusion. Trouble everywhere, it seems that hope is an illusion. Everywhere you turn, another tragedy. Sad to see, but rise, oh, rise, oh, rise, oh, rise, oh, rise up. Lift your eyes, oh, eyes, oh, eyes, oh.